Well, here's Andrew Ross Sorkin saying, like, everything's going to be fine for the Melvin Group. They are now have announced that they're bankrupt. But here he is. This was him yesterday. No, this morning, right? This is how fast this thing's moving. Go ahead.
We have some breaking news right now on what has turned into the soap opera and saga of the markets right now, and that is the story of GameStop. The news to bring you right now is that Melvin Capital Management, this is the hedge fund that had shorted this company that had effectively been attacked by an army of investors trying to push up and press up the stock of GameStop along the way. Melvin Capital is now out of the stock. They got out of the stock, from what I understand, yesterday afternoon. I just got off the telephone with Gabriel Plotkin, who runs that firm. They've taken a rather huge loss. I do not have the full number on what that loss looked like. As was reported yesterday, both Citadel and Point72 have infused something on the order of close to $3 billion into Melvin Capital to try to shore up its finances. And Gabe Plotkin telling me just moments ago that the speculation that the firm would file for bankruptcy is false. There's some reporting taking place on Reddit where so much of this discussion.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out he was wrong. We have an updated clip too, right? Let's play this. Do we have an updated one?
So now that they have filed for bankruptcy, like, this is one of the more progressive, like, renegade investors. It's really hard to pronounce his name, but he's gone viral a few times for his appearances on CNBC talking about inequity in the markets and, like, how at the start of the pandemic, he said giving cash to people, that's the way to jumpstart the economy. Yep. Talking about this phenomenon.
Next guest, he tweeted on Tuesday that he'd gone long through call options. Chamath Palihapitiya is the CEO of Social Capital. He joins us now on the phone. Chamath, thank you for being here.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So you tweeted yesterday that you bought $115 calls in GameStop. Can you tell me what your position is as of this very moment?
Yeah. Can I tell you a little story before all of that, or no?
Why don't you tell me that first, and then we'll go from there.
So this morning I woke up after spending all last night in Wall Street Bets, reading about all of this stuff. I ended up closing up my position this morning, and I wanted to announce that I'm taking all the profits that I made, plus my original position. So I'm going to take $500,000, and I'm going to donate to the Barstool Fund for Small Businesses. But I really want to tell you, beyond the $500,000 donation or the money that I invested, which was, not a huge amount in the grand scheme of that stock or the entire market, what I learned, because I think what I learned over the last couple of days is important for everybody that's watching CNBC.
And that is?
I think that what you're seeing is essentially a pushback against the establishment in a really important way. You have a lot of people, and I would encourage anybody who is dismissive of this thing to go into Wall Street Bets and actually just read the forums. And I think that you're going to see three kinds of posts. The first kind of content are a lot of people doing some incredible fundamental diligence on companies, trying to think about long-term value. And in my opinion, many of them are doing as good and, frankly, a better job than a lot of hedge fund analysts that I work with. That's number one. The second are a lot of people who believe that, coming out of 2008, what happened was Wall Street took an enormous amount of risk, and they left retail as the bag holder. And a lot of these kids were in grade school and high school when that happened. They lost their homes. Their parents lost their jobs. And they've always wondered, why did those folks get bailed out for taking enormous amounts of risk and nobody helped and showed up to help my family? And then the third thing is a realization that instead of having idea dinners or, quiet whispered conversations amongst hedge funds in the Hamptons, these kids have the courage to do it transparently in a forum. And I'm not saying all of it is perfect by any means, but I think it takes an enormous amount of faith in the system to be that transparent, to talk about things, and then for each individual to make their own mind up and to do things, whether it's to buy and to sell.
I mean, that's
I just think it's important because that perspective is never, ever uttered on CNBC. It's treated like a massive casino, and the material consequences of what people went through in 2008, that's what informs this. I mean, all these kids or young people on Reddit, some of them work in Wall Street, right? But some of them are just regular Joes who just see that, like, have zero qualms about doing this, about gutting hedge funds, because they shouldn't.
If you go back, certainly, you can find a lot of this in the early days of this particular iteration of the show. Interviews with people. I mean, Dan wrote a book about this, Chain of Title, but we spoke to Borofsky. I mean, we did many interviews on how they saved the banks, how Barack Obama had an opportunity. There's a story that was told by Barney Frank. I can't remember exactly where it appears, but it's not hard to find, I think, in retrospect. That Paulson, who was at the time the Treasury Secretary, or was it the Fed? He was at the Fed, I believe. I can't remember. I can't remember if Paulson was the Treasury Secretary or at the Fed. This, 10 years of my brain is mush now. But when Barack Obama was the president-elect, there was a proposal. I think it was Barney Frank was looking to. There's two ways you could do this, right? You could go and you could make sure that the banks are made whole or they're backstopped. You had all of these loans that they had securitized, and the loans turned out to be garbage because the real estate values dropped. Many of these houses had loans that could not be supported, that were too big for the value of the underlying asset, which was the home. And there's two ways that you could have done this. You could have, one, given monies to the homeowners and said, here's money to go pay off the banks. Or you could have done that by also saying, like, okay, instead of actually here's money to go pay off the banks, it's like we are cramming down your interest, or we're cramming down your principal, and we will make the banks whole, but you're going to get credit for it. We're going to pay the banks for you, but it's going to be basically passed through you so that you get credit for it. You could have done that in a couple of different ways, but the bottom line being they owe less, and their house, the principal that they borrowed was not on their ledgers, was not a liability for the homeowner. And they would make the bank whole. Or you could just go and backstop the bank and say to the banks, hey, now that we've got you covered, please let these homeowners off the hook. And they did the latter because ostensibly they didn't want to train homeowners into thinking, or consumers or people or citizens, that like, hey, we will backstop you if your debts are bad. But they had no problem backstopping the banks. So in other words, they were worried about the moral hazard on the borrowers. They weren't worried about the moral hazard on the lenders. And if you are a bank loan officer, you have a fiduciary responsibility. That's why they have bank regulators to assess bank loans. And the reason why, you get certain backstops and why you get interest on these loans is because you're taking a risk and you may go under. And the Obama administration basically set it up to pay off the banks. We ended up having millions of foreclosures in this country. And so much of the anger and resentment comes out of that because it's one house forecloses. Somebody drops the keys there or walks away, or they foreclose or whatnot. You destroy whole neighborhoods. And you destroy a whole neighborhood, you start destroying whole communities. And in many respects, we're still sort of seeing the blowback from that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point about how this is people in my generation coming to collect, I guess, from Wall Street greed and retaliating in an online way via Reddit in ways that traditional banking executives and hedge fund guys who make these massive decisions that affect the economy in closed rooms and in hushed whispers in a way that they don't understand. And I think that's what's so thrilling about it too. And the narcissism and the sociopathy with which a lot of these Wall Street people have just moved past the effects of the economic collapse that you're discussing. That's what caused them to underestimate this and now that they're outraged that regular people are now treating our play money like a casino, like we've been doing for decades and decades. Yeah, the anger is so real, right? Yeah, mods.
Yeah, here's a drill tweet. Mods, one of those obscene low follower count boys stole a lick from the delicious lolly that father bought me. How dreadful.
And then I also saw a meme where it was Snape saying, "How dare you use your own spells against me, Potter?" And that's what Wall Street is right now. Like, that's exactly what this is. And I mean, I still from the primary, I went to an Elizabeth Warren rally, and I was asking why this young guy, why he was for Warren as opposed to Sanders. And basically he said, my family lost my home, and she was on the front lines there. I mean, I voted for Bernie in the primary, right? But that was one of the moments, like, that showed me in a mosaic of many that, like, people were making specific decisions, political decisions of my generation, based on the trauma of the economic collapse, and it's constantly underestimated. And that's what's so glorious about what's happening today with GameStop and all the other driving up of these stock prices based on these democratic forums. I tweeted this, like, we're getting more accountability from Wall Street based on Reddit than we've gotten in decades from the federal government.
There is a quality of sort of like that old Western, right, where, the father's killed in front of the son.
Yeah.
And he goes and
it's very
goes
Tarantino.
away for 10, 15 years. Well, it
predates. He's, I know, echoing it, but whatever. I thought about Kill Bill. That was my first
right.
thing.
But
Yeah.
I mean, it's an almost archetypal story, And then Batman. I mean, on some level, right? I mean, and
they're doing it in the cloak of, instead of having a dark suit in the cloak of night, they're doing it on
Reddit.
On Reddit.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
They go into the desert and start to train, and then they come back and they take.
And the Biden administration just got asked about this. Like, they're looking into it. I mean, it's crazy.